Welcome to English Listening Practice. Today's episode, Overcoming the Fear of Making Mistakes. This episode has 100 parts. Listen carefully and enjoy. Welcome to the podcast. I am so glad you could join me today for another episode. Today, we are talking about something that every single human being experiences at some point in their lives. Have you ever stopped yourself from trying something completely new because you thought you might look foolish? Maybe you wanted to apply for a new job, but you decided not to send your application. You probably told yourself that you would not get the job anyway, so why bother? That feeling is incredibly common, and it is exactly what we are going to explore today. It might surprise you to know that many famous, highly successful people experienced huge disappointments before they reached their goals. Some of the greatest inventors and business leaders were rejected dozens of times before anyone believed in their ideas. They did not reach the top by being perfect on their first attempt. So I want to set a reassuring tone right from the start of this episode. Feeling anxious about messing up is a completely normal human emotion, and you are definitely not alone. Let's begin by defining what we actually mean when we talk about this specific anxiety. In simple terms, the fear of failure is the deep worry that we will not succeed and that other people will judge us. We imagine our friends, family, or colleagues laughing at us or thinking that we are not smart enough. Psychologically, there is a very good reason why we feel this way. Our brains are designed to keep us safe, comfortable, and protected from any kind of harm. Thousands of years ago, making a mistake could actually be dangerous to our physical survival. Today, the danger is usually just to our ego, but our brain still reacts in the same protective way. It tells us to stay exactly where we are, doing the things we already know how to do. We call this safe space our comfort zone, and it feels really nice and warm inside it. However, staying in that comfort zone actually stops our personal growth. If you never step outside of it, you will never discover what you are truly capable of achieving. It limits our potential, especially when it comes to learning new skills like a language. Think about how many times you have stayed quiet in an English conversation because you were worried about your grammar. By choosing to stay silent, you missed a valuable chance to practice and improve. The comfort zone protects us from embarrassment, but it also builds a wall between us and our goals. Now that we understand why we feel this way, let's talk about how we can change our perspective. The first major step is to change the actual vocabulary we use in our own minds. Instead of using the word failure, I want you to start calling it a learning experience. When things do not go as planned, it is simply the universe giving you helpful feedback. It is information that tells you what does not work, which brings you one step closer to finding what does work. This concept is closely tied to something psychologists call a growth mindset. Having a growth mindset means you believe your abilities can improve with time, effort, and practice. People with this mindset understand that nobody is born an expert at anything. Let's look at a very clear example that most of us can easily relate to. Think back to when you were a child, learning how to ride a bicycle for the very first time. You probably fell off the bike, scraped your knees, and maybe even cried a little bit. Did you immediately decide that you were a terrible cyclist and give up forever? Of course not, because falling down is a required part of learning how to balance. Speaking a foreign language operates on the exact same principle as riding that bicycle. Making mistakes with verb tenses or forgetting vocabulary is absolutely required if you want to become fluent. Each time you use the wrong word, you receive feedback, and your brain adjusts for the next time. If you had never made any errors, you would never have learned how to correct them. Treating these moments as helpful feedback removes the heavy pressure we put on ourselves. It turns a negative situation into a puzzle that you get to solve. So remember that stumbling along the way is not a personal defeat, but a stepping stone. Another incredibly useful mental tool for reducing anxiety is analyzing the worst possible outcome. We often call this the worst-case scenario technique, and it is very practical. When you feel nervous about taking a risk, pause for a moment and ask yourself a simple question. What is the absolute worst thing that can happen if I do this and it goes wrong? Let your mind explore that negative outcome completely, without hiding from it. You will quickly realize that the worst case is almost never actually dangerous. Most of the time, the worst result is just a temporary feeling of embarrassment. You might feel awkward for a few minutes, or someone might correct you. But you will still have your health, your friends, and your life will go on exactly as before. Our imagination is incredibly powerful, and it usually makes the fear much bigger than reality. We create huge, terrifying movies in our heads about how terrible the situation will be. Once you clearly define the worst-case scenario, it suddenly loses its power over you. You can look at that slightly embarrassing outcome and say, I can handle that. Knowing you can survive the worst outcome gives you the freedom to take action. It is like turning on a light in a dark room and seeing that the monster was just a pile of clothes. This technique helps bring your brain back to logic instead of staying stuck in pure emotion. If you had known this trick earlier, think of all the chances you might have taken. I use this method myself whenever I feel hesitant about launching a new project. I write down the worst things that could happen, and usually it just means I lose a little bit of time. Compared to the potential rewards, that tiny risk is almost always worth taking. Now, let's look at how we can apply these concepts to common, everyday situations you might experience. Imagine you are in an important job interview, or perhaps a business meeting, speaking English. You want to express a complex idea, but you use the wrong tense, and the sentence sounds confusing. Your face turns red, and you feel that familiar wave of panic washing over you. Instead of freezing, you can use our new perspective right in that exact moment. Take a deep breath, smile, correct yourself if you can, and simply move forward with your point. The interviewers are usually focusing on your ideas, not counting every single grammar mistake you make. Let's consider a second scenario, outside of language learning, like trying a brand new hobby. Suppose you decide to join a salsa dance class or take a course in gourmet cooking. On the first day, you step on your partner's toes, or you completely burn the meal you were preparing. It would be very easy to walk out the door and swear you will never dance or cook again. But if you remember the bicycle example, you know that being bad on day one is mandatory. You can laugh at your burnt dinner, order a pizza, and plan to try the recipe again tomorrow. How you react in the moment determines whether you grow or whether you retreat into your shell. A simple smile and a deep breath are your strongest weapons against feeling foolish. To help you build your courage gradually, I want to share some actionable steps you can start taking today. My first tip is to start with very small risks to build your confidence slowly. You do not need to give a public speech to 1,000 people tomorrow morning. Instead, try speaking up just once in a small group discussion, or leave a comment in English online. These tiny steps train your brain that taking risks is safe and manageable. My second tip is to celebrate the effort and the courage it took to try. We usually only reward ourselves when we get a perfect final result, which is a huge mistake. Be proud of yourself simply because you raised your hand or sent that difficult email. This leads us to a very common mistake you should definitely try to avoid. Please do not be too harsh on yourself when things actually do go wrong. Many of us have an inner critic that says terrible things we would never say to a friend. Practicing self-compassion means treating yourself gently and recognizing that learning is a messy process. As we come to the end of today's episode, let's quickly summarize what we have covered. We learned that feeling anxious about messing up is completely normal, but it should not control your choices. By viewing setbacks as helpful feedback, you can develop a powerful growth mindset. We also discussed asking yourself what the worst-case scenario really is, which shrinks the fear down to a manageable size. Your comfort zone is cozy, but nothing beautiful ever grows there. My final encouraging message for you is to take just one small risk today, no matter how tiny it seems. Embrace the possibility of stumbling, because it means you are finally moving forward. And that's the end of today's episode, Overcoming the Fear of Making Mistakes. I hope you learned something new and enjoyed listening. Keep practicing every day. Your English is getting better and better. Follow this channel for more English listening practice. See you next time.